Parak Dalet, which is how to bring the midah of Chochma into the world. And remember, going through the spheres, we have Kesser, then we have Chochma. Just 1 second here. Parak Gimel. Let's talk about Parak Gimel. And basically, we went through the idea that Chochma is something that gives life. Chochma is something that is machabed, it honors all creations, and Ramak talks about not only Jews, but even non-Jews, and not only non-Jews, but even animals and plants. Very, very interesting idea, According to halacha like this, people often ask a question, am I allowed to kill insects? Am I allowed to kill rats or mice, whatever it is? So, al pi halacha, there's a davar pashut, that there is an isser called sar ba'alei chayim. You're not allowed to cause animals pain. But if you simply kill them because they're bothering you or whatever it is, it's absolutely mutter. Right? Killing insects is absolutely not a problem. Killing rats is not a problem. You shouldn't have a type of trap that causes them to starve to death because that's giving them pain and suffering, but you kill them quickly, whatever it is. And certainly there's no problem with ripping leaves off trees or off plants. I walk by, I rip a leaf. Now, there may be a shiloh of gezel if it's not my plant. I might be stealing something, but generally speaking, halachically, there's no issur. The only issur that we have is not killing animals. We have an issur of tsar ba'alei chayim, to cause animals tsar. In fact, I remember years and years ago reading an article in Newsweek where somebody said, what was the argument? The argument was, why is my grandmother worse than a dog? This was an argument that there ought to be euthanasia for patients who are suffering terminal illness. And the argument is, if your dog has cancer, you can take the dog to the vet, and the vet puts the dog to sleep, kills the dog. But my grandmother has cancer. She's suffering tremendously. She would like to have someone just take her life, and that's forbidden, right? That's suicide. So the argument is that grandma is treated worse than a dog. But of course, it's really the opposite. I mean, given the fact that the life of a human being is so infinitely significant, it cannot be terminated. But the emes to kill a dog because a dog is suffering is actually almost a mitzvah, because that way you're preventing tsar ba'alei chayim. So in halacha, there is no problem with killing animals, even if it's not for shechita. The problem is only causing them pain. And by the way, shechita is well known, is a very painless way of killing animals. The animal loses consciousness immediately. But in Mekubalim, particularly in the Ramak, there actually is a different idea. The Ramak says part of the midah of Chochma, just as God gives life to every creature, so too I bring this Chochma into the world by emulating Hashem's midah and recognize the significance, the importance of every single life. Jew, non-Jew, animal, plant. And therefore the Mekubalim had certain hanhagos that were not noeg l'maisa, in which they would not pull a leaf off a tree unless they had a legitimate reason for doing so, like harvesting a crop or harvesting a fruit or whatever it would be. And the Ramak locates this extreme reverence for every form of living being, including plant life, in the midah of Chochma, right? This is the midah of Chochma. Ma rabu masecha Hashem. How many are your different creations, Hashem? Kulam b'Chochma asisa. All of them were made in Chochma. Chochma is the divine force that gives life, and therefore we bring that Chochma of Hashem into the world by emulating that and by validating, by supporting, by being machshiv, the idea of life. And that has both a physical dimension of not wantonly destroying anything, and it has a spiritual, psychological dimension of always giving life to people who might be depressed, who might be unhappy. You want to give them life, right? Your midah of Chochma is to pick up their spirits. Use your kayach hadibor in a positive way, because that's Chochma. You're giving the brokenhearted the idea of life. Okay, it's a very important idea. I've mentioned many times, and it's a pasuk in Tanakh. Shlomo HaMelech says, Hamaves v'hachayim biyad halashain. Life and death are in the hands of the tongue. And this doesn't just mean your words can get you killed, which indeed can happen sometimes, but it means that my koyach of dibor can raise a person and give them life, or my koyach of dibor can destroy a person psychologically, which is similar to killing them. You can kill a person in a lot of ways. You can kill a person by shooting a gun at them, and you can kill a person by talking to them a certain way. That can literally kill a person. Maybe not physically, maybe he won't keel over and have a heart attack, but psychologically they can be absolutely devastated. You know, the old statements that Mom used to say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, is actually not true at all. The sticks and the stones that break bones can heal, particularly when you're younger. Broken bones can heal relatively quickly. But the hurt and the pain and the shame and the humiliation of harsh words can remain with a person forever. And the midah of Chochma is to try to give life rather than take life, because the midah of Hashem's Chochma is how Hashem infuses the universe with life. I think I mentioned before a story with Rav Aaron Kotler, where when Rav Aaron Kotler started, he came to the United States in the middle of World War II, and he did not start any yeshiva in America. He was already a Rosh Yeshiva in Europe as a young man, but he did not start a yeshiva during the war years because he felt he had to try to bring over as many Jews that he could, and he was very osek in bringing Yidden to America, taking them out of Europe, getting them papers, and the like. But after the war was over, in 1945, he began to start a Makom Torah. He first started it in White Plains, New York. So White Plains actually has the honor of being the first home of what became Lakewood. Then he moved to Lakewood. Lakewood at the time, there are old-timers still remember Lakewood before the Yeshiva Lakewood. Lakewood was a vacation resort. It was a summer resort where people would go for vacations. Now Lakewood has become a very urbanized kind of area. And Rav Aaron started his yeshiva with very few Talmidim. But Rav Aaron was not there most of the time. Rav Aaron, number one, lived in Borough Park, lived in Brooklyn. And number two, Rav Aaron spent most of his week on the road collecting money for Lakewood. He would come to the yeshiva on Shabbos, and he would give his shir on Shabbos. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is actually unbelievable. Pedagogically, it's a little hard to understand. Rav Aaron's shir was enormously complicated. I mean, even if you were a big Talmid Chacham, you'd have a lot of difficulty following it. Very, very complicated. And it was long, like 3-hour shir. And he did it on Shabbos where nobody could take any notes, or whatever it is. So to give a complicated 3-hour shir on Shabbos was very difficult, but that was literally the only time that he had. He ate with the guys. His Rebbetzin did not come with him. And he had a dormitory room, etc. And he would give his 3-hour shir. But most of the week he was collecting money. Now in those days, we're talking about the 40s, the 50s. Rav Aaron was nifter in like 1962, I believe. In those days, even among Orthodox people, even among frum people, the notion of like full-time learning was not really understood. The most you could get away with was you would explain, we're trying to prepare rabbis who will serve congregations. That's at least a job description. But Rav Aaron didn't want to say that. Rav Aaron didn't want to say that the purpose of our yeshiva is to produce rabbis. Rav Aaron introduced the idea, I'm not saying he was the absolute first, but he was the strongest spokesman of the idea of Torah Lishma, that learning Torah itself is very, very important to the world, even if it's not going to turn into a career of a rabbi or whatever it would be. And that was a very hard sell. I mean, there weren't that many Orthodox Jews anyway, and the typical Orthodox Jew in America didn't understand the idea. Even today, there's a problem of Torah Lishma. What is Torah Lishma? What on earth is that? But whatever. So he went around, and people gave him $1, $5. They gave him small donations. And even in the 50s, that was relatively small money. I mean, $5 then was more than $5 now, but it was still You wouldn't get rich. The yeshiva wouldn't prosper with those small donations. But he went around collecting. Sometimes he made the Kollel payroll. Sometimes he didn't make the Kollel payroll. I mean, there were people who left Lakewood who were owed money for 15 years. I mean, they had 15 years back salary. That was, that's how dachkus things were in those days. Very, 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 very difficult. Eventually they got paid, but sometimes it took many, many years. So the story goes that he was with a Talmud collecting money, and he was in Miami, and somebody entered, a woman entered the elevator, and she was dressed not b'tznius. She was wearing a bathing suit. And Rav Aaron started crying. In other words, this kind of broke him, meaning with all the bizyayness that people would give him nothing, or give him a little bit, or kick him out, or say, why is he bringing European stuff to America? Doesn't he understand this is a new country? So he was constantly being humiliated, but this actually broke him that he had to experience this. To him, again, maybe for us it wouldn't even bother us so much, but whatever, for a gadol to be exposed to things that are so opposite of the milas of tznius was a very, very devastating thing. So he began sobbing. His Talmud asked him, Rebbe, could you explain something to me? You're such a gadol, you're such a Talmud Chacham, you're such a tzaddik, you were a gadol in Europe already. And at 22, he was already a great Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Aaron, why is Hashem putting you in a situation where you're humiliated, you have to suffer day after day after day? All of these bizyayness. Why would Hashem bring such a thing to you? It's not really a question. It was more of a cry of anguish. But the Talmud says, why? Why would it happen to you? So Rav Aaron said the following idea. Rav Aaron said, the halacha that if you murder somebody, you kill somebody, b'shogeg, you kill somebody inadvertently, right? You go through a red light, or you throw something out of your window, and God forbid, kill somebody. But it's not b'mezid. You didn't intend to kill somebody. So there's a halacha in the Torah called ohr.edu, where you go to the city of refuge. And what is that called? That's described in the Mishnah as golus. You're exiled from your home. Right? You go into golus. Golus is the punishment for accidental homicide. Manslaughter, we would call it in legal terms. So says Rav Aaron, every teacher of Torah is potentially a rotseach b'shogeg. How is that so? Because the words that we use to people might be murdering them. You might destroy their spirit. A single word, the way a question is addressed, the way a Talmud is spoken to, that can crush a person. You're a rotseach. Now, Baruch Hashem, we're not mezidin, Rav Aaron said. We don't do it on purpose. We don't want to destroy somebody. But what is the onish of a rotseach b'shogeg? He goes into galus. So it was nigzar that Rosh Yeshiva have to go from place to place to place to collect money, and they represent the whole yeshiva. So that's why some of the Rebbeim get out of it, so to speak, because Ritzicha b'shogeg, that's what it is. A Ritzeach b'shogeg goes into galus. A Rosh Yeshiva goes into galus because he's a Ritzeach, or he or his yeshiva, or some Rebbeim in his yeshiva, because he represents them, are Rotzchim b'shogeg. This is an amazing idea. This is the power of the word. And the truth of the matter is, we see this all the time. It's not, the phenomenon that a casual remark, sometimes a joke at somebody's expense, which is a joke, really. Somebody told me on my say, it's hard to understand things, that kind of an American guy who was wearing a collarless shirt, like whatever it is, brought his son to a bracha to somebody that he described as a gadol. I don't know who I don't know, and I don't want to know, and whatever. And the gadol's bracha is, may Hashem bless you that you get a decent shirt. Now, it was a joke. So again, it was a joke, but the way the person described it to me was, I was in front of a lot of people, and everybody was laughing. Everybody was laughing. And I felt like I wanted to go into the crowd. Now, it's a davar pashut. I mean, I don't even know if the story is true, so I'm not saying anything about anybody. But it's a davar pashut that if it's true, it was not meant in a malicious way. It was meant in a joking way. A joke is a joke. A joke can be funny. But you see that sometimes the way a person takes the remark doesn't take it as a joke. So a person has to be very careful. Jokes are good. Jokes are good. In fact, even joking about a person is sometimes a way of creating a friendship. You joke, it's kind of, we like each other. But sometimes if it's taken the wrong way, it can destroy a person. Very, very difficult balance. Very, very difficult balance. And this is exactly what Rav Aaron is saying when he says that a Maggid Shir, a Marbitz Torah, a Rebbe, a Rosh Yeshiva, can be a Reitzeach b'Sheigeg. Yeah? The power of words. So to come back to the Tamar Devorah, this is the opposite of the Midah of Chochma. The Midah of Chochma is the force that gives life into the world, and therefore if we want divine life to infuse the Bria in a positive way, we have to be life givers, and that both means in the physical way of not destroying life. Even Chiddush here is even animal and plants, which is again a Chiddush of the Mekubalim. It's not a halacha per se. And psychologically to build people up and give them chiyus, give them life and encouragement, which can include humor. Again, I'm not advocating humorless seriousness and everything. That can include humor too. But in assessing humor, one has to be very, very, very careful. People take it in different ways. Some people laugh it off and they enjoy. They'll laugh with the other group, with the rest of the group. Other people get devastated and humiliated and destroyed. So how do you know, right? I want to make a joke. How do I know? Well, if you don't know, misafek, you have to be machmer. If you know, you can proceed based on what you know. But don't take things for granted. First of all, the Israeli mentality, bichlal, might be different than the American mentality, right? So what might be good-natured ribbing here might be taken by an American in a different way. So you have to know your culture, the cultural milieu as well. So these are important things. Again, the Sefer like the Tamar Devorah is really a practical, it is, there's a lot of Kabbalah in it, to be sure, but it's a practical manual that we should look at in terms of these interactions. Okay, so that's basically Chochma. Now the next Sphira is Binah. So now I have to give you a little background on Chochma and Binah. Chochma and Binah. Now, generally speaking, it's commonly said, although the Mekubalim do not go with this definition so much, that Chochma refers to knowledge and Binah is extrapolation, where you understand from what you know, you're able to draw new conclusions. That is called Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar. Right? So a Chacham may have read the encyclopedia. A Maven is able to apply it to new situations. Psak Halacha is a very classic example. You can be a person who memorized all 4 halakim of the Shulchan Aruch. You know every din in the Shulchan Aruch with all the commentaries. But you might not know how to paskin about using a microwave on Shabbos simply because I read all the commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch and nothing was said about a microwave, right? So obviously, any posek has to use Binah to take from the body of factual knowledge and apply it to new situations, right? That's psak. Psak halacha is not just memorizing the Mishnah Berurah, but it's to know or to be able to apply it to a situation that is not in the Mishnah Berurah. In fact, to digress for a moment, this is why, to really understand halacha, you have to go back to the Gemara. You have to go back to the background. You have to go back to the reasons. You have to go back to the fundamental principles. Because if all you know are these specific rules, and you don't know their reason and their background, you will know those specific rules. So if something comes up that's exactly what is covered by that rule, you will be able to answer it. You say, oh, that's exactly what the Mishnah Berurah says in Siman, Chaf Beis, and the like. That's fine. And that may answer a lot of questions. Yeah, what happens if I skipped Yalav Yavo at Ma'ariv? Okay, you don't need to know the Gemara to answer that question because that's explicit, that's beferish. But when a new shaila comes up that is not explicit, you're not going to be able to answer it from the rules in the Shulchan Aruch or the Mishnah Berurah unless you know the Gemara and the background. Now, the Gemara itself is not going to give you the answer, but by knowing the svaras and knowing the reasons, you'll then be able to extrapolate. So the simplest, most common understanding of Chochma versus Binah is Chochma is factual knowledge, and Binah is the ability to extrapolate and draw conclusions to address new situations based on the Chochma that you've acquired. I think I may have mentioned that the Chassam Sofer has a gewaldige Wort based on this, what we'll call conventional understanding, in Ma'os Sur. I'm going to go back to Hanukkah a little bit. The song Ma'os Sur, the author of whom was an anonymous person called Mordechai, because it spells out Mordechai, the first letter of each stanza, is really describing all of the exiles that the Jewish people have gone through. Mitzrayim, Bavel, Persia, Yavan, and Edom, the last one. So the truth of the matter is, it is only the next to the last stanza that deals with Hanukkah. Yavanim, Nikbatsu Alai. Most of Ma'os Sur is not about Hanukkah. Most of Ma'os Sur is about the other exiles. But in the Ma'os Sur stanza, dealing with Hanukkah, that's the one that begins with the Yud. Yavanim, Nikbatsu Alai. That's why it's a separate nigun, because it's a Hanukkah song. So it mentions B'nai Binah, the children or the people of understanding, Yemei Shemona, Kavu Shirananim. They established 8 days for singing and rejoicing. So the Chachamim, who were Kovei Hanukkah, are called in this poem B'nai Binah, children or people of understanding. Why are they called B'nai Binah? So there's a simple answer and a deeper answer. The simple answer is this is necessary for the rhyming pattern because Binah rhymes with Shemona. So B'nai Binah, Yemei Shemona. Ma'os Sur is a very intricate rhyme, and the truth of the matter is it's not such a dochik answer to say that certain expressions are used because they facilitate the rhyming pattern of the Zemer. Right? You don't always need a yeshiva sheteretz for every type of question. But the Chassam Sofer gives a deeper reason. Everyone knows, and we talked about this as well, the famous question of Rav Yosef Karo, the Beis Yosef, and people asked it before the Beis Yosef. And that is, if they found enough oil for 1 day, and it burnt for 8 days, then the miracle is only 7 days. So why is Hanukkah celebrated for 8 days? We only ought to celebrate Hanukkah for 7 days because the 7 days are the miracle. Now, quite literally, in my own lifetime, I've seen inflation of answers here. There used to be 50 answers, then there was 100 answers, then there were 250 answers, Kaminyan Ner B'Gematria, 250. Now, there's a sefer that has 1,000 terutzim to the Beis Yosef's answer, to the Beis Yosef's question. The Beis Yosef himself gives 3 terutzim, but now we have 1,000. Now the truth of the matter is, once you start looking into it, I did not read 1,000 answers, but there's a lot of duplication. Sometimes they kind of take answer 37 and they change one little thing, and that becomes answer 98. Meaning, the changes are sometimes so small that unless you wanted to say I have 1,000 answers, you wouldn't really count it as separate terutzim, but. There is a tiny little difference here and there and there and there, and they make 1,000 answers out of it. But one of the beautiful answers that they give is that part of why Hanukkah is 8 days is that we should realize that even the things in life that are normal, even the things that are not miraculous, because they're the way life normally works, are really from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Ramban says, life itself is miraculous. Meaning the pshat is, don't think it's only the extra days of the oil burning that are a miracle, but the fact that oil burns at all Das heißt a miracle as well. In fact, the Ramban writes, the word nes means, which means miracle, it actually means flag or banner. Just like we say in Shemona Esrei. We say, Tikah b'shofar gadol l'chayruseinu, blow the great shofar for our freedom, v'san nes, lift up the banner, nes, l'kabetz guluyosenu, to gather our exiles. So a nes is a flag, like a red flag. A flag draws your attention. The Eibishter does supernatural things, so you'll know he's in the world. So even what is done b'derech hateva is only mitzad HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha. Without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha, it wouldn't happen. That's why Shemona Esrei says also in Modim, Al nisecha shebachol yom imanu, the miracles that are with us every single day. So Teva and Nes are just different types of miracles. A Nes is a miracle that breaks the habitual laws of nature. Teva is Hashem running things the way he normally runs them, but it's still Hashem running it. It's not automatic. It's not like Hashem made he wound up a clock and the clock keeps on ticking. Rather, the Eibishter is recreating every second. So it's a nes. It's just as much of a hashgacha as the nes itself. So says the Chassam Sofer, a Chacham would have made Chanukah 7 days. A Chacham observes the facts. The facts are, there was enough oil for 1 day. I see a miracle of 7 days. A Chacham would have made Chanukah 7 days. But a Binah, B'nai Binah, Mevin Dover mitoch Dover, from the 7 days, it's a nes, I understand that even the first day is a miracle as well. Very medoyak. B'nai Binah Yemei Shemayna. So the rhyme fits the idea. Because of Binah, we make Chanukah 8 days. Chochma would have made Chanukah only 7 days. It's like the Gemara says, one of the Tanoim, Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa, the Gemara in Tainus has a whole parak about the different Tanoim who were great miracle workers. Choni Hamago, different people who were Mitsuyan, they were known for their kayach to do nisim. So Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa was a Tana who was a miracle worker. He could do all sorts of nisim. And yet, he lived in tremendous poverty. He didn't want to use. In fact, his Rebbetzin said, why don't you do your nisim so we could live a little better? And he showed her that if we were to take advantage of Maisa Nisim and Olam Hazeh, we would have less Olam Haba. It would take away from Olam Haba. He showed her that when you're Mishtamish B'Nisim, that takes away from your Chelek in Shemayim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says about Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa, Kala Eilam Kulai Nizain Bischus Chanina B'ni. The whole world gets Parnasa in the merit of Chanina, my son. V'Chanina B'ni Dailai B'kav Charuvim Me'erev Shabbos Li'erev Shabbos. But he lives such a poor life that he just eats a small measure of carob, charuv, from Friday to Friday. Meaning he doesn't, he lives in poverty. He brings parnasa to the whole world. So the Gemara has a story that one time, his wife, they were so poor in the house, his wife did not have shemen zayis, she did not have olive oil to light for Shabbos candles. So Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa said she should light with vinegar. So she said, vinegar does not light. You can't use vinegar as a fuel. So he said, Hashem, who said oil should light, can say vinegar could light. Meaning the same way oil lights is only Hashem. So Hashem can do this, Hashem can do that. And they lit b'chaimetz, vinegar, and indeed it lit. Because he was makir. He reached the madrega where he was makir. That even teva is nice. And once you're makir, that even teva is nes, then nes can become teva. The supernatural miracles can become your nature. Because you know, teva and nes are essentially interchangeable ideas. right? So, going back to this. So this is what we would call the conventional understanding of Chochma and Binah. And in fact, it even applies to women as well. Chazal say that women are given Binah Yesera. They are given extra Binah. It doesn't say extra Chochma. It says extra Binah. And again, the Meforshim basically say this refers to the well-known phenomenon of female intuition, meaning to say the Chacham, the man, sees the facts, and he knows the facts. The woman can extrapolate about the nature of the person from the facts in a deeper way that a man can do. That is the notion of Binah Yisera. In fact, even the statement that is sometimes pejorative, it's interesting. There's a Maimer Chazal that says, Isha tsara eineha biorchim. A woman she doesn't like guests. She's more critical of guests than a man. Now, the simple meaning is because she, usually the woman works harder in feeding extra guests, so she might resent it a little bit more. I mean, that's a pashut pshat, and indeed, that has truth as well. But some learn it differently. Some say that the tzarei na bi'orchen is connected to Binah Yisera, because every time you bring a guest into your home, that guest brings a certain energy that may either positively affect the family or negatively affect the family. In other words, the energy changes, whatever it would be. The energy, the environment, things will be changed. They might be elevated. They might be, descending. So the concept is the woman is more sensitive to the potential aspect of the guest on the overall family dynamics of the children, and as a result, she might be more reluctant to bring certain forces in that may hurt the children in very subtle ways. I mean, listen, no one's going to become an apikaris because one Shabbos meal, but nevertheless, it comes from her sensitivity. It doesn't come from a lack of concern for others, but it comes from the Binah Yisera, in which she could weigh the potentially negative consequence, if for no other reason than neglecting the children. Even if it's a good guest, sometimes there's an issue that the children's needs are not being addressed. Yeah.
So is lack of sensitivity like a virtue in some cases, because you might help someone who you might have not otherwise helped if you were sensitive to their, you end up producing a good result because you don't see the bad that's there?
I think there's a certain point to that. Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, Yosef das, Yosef machayev. Sometimes the greater das you have, which we'll identify as Binah here, gives you more pain in life. It gets to, what do they say? They have a beautiful word from the HaRav. The HaRav was one of the great Hasidic Rebbes of the 1800s. And he was called the Ohev Yisrael, the lover of Israel, and his book on Chumash is called Ohev Yisrael. And his idea was that every single parsha in the Torah, you have lessons of Avas Yisrael. So somebody asked him, where do you see Avas Yisrael in Parshas Balak? Now, l'chayra, it's not so difficult because Parshas Balak has many praises about the Jewish people and the like. So he says, very, very simple. I'll show you where you see that in Parshas Balak. He says, the word Balak, the base is v'ahavta, you shall love. The lamed is l'reyacha, your friend. And the kuf is kamocha. So the word Balak, v'ahavta, l'reyacha, kamocha. So somebody said, Rebbe, 2 of the 3 letters aren't right. V'ahavta is a vav. Balak is a vase, at best. Lamed is correct. Kamocha is a chaf, and Balak is a kuf. So 2 out of the 3 letters don't correspond to v'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. So says the Abder Rebbe, when you have Avas Yisrael, you don't look too closely at things. In other words, even though it doesn't fit so well, He says, you're not there focusing on what's right and what's wrong, right? So that's exactly, it's kind of what you're saying, that to be hyper-focused on things. But the difference is this, though, I think there is a difference, because it's one thing to say, I'm going to help you even though I see all sorts of chesronas. But on the other hand, I shouldn't be a tzaddik at the expense of somebody else, meaning if my children are going to be hurt, I do have to take that into account. I can't just say, no, my mitzvah of chesed is so great that whatever the impact on my children, right? So it's a cheshbon that people who work in kiruv, have to deal with. Okay, so this is the idea of what we'll call the conventional Chochma Binah. Chochma is taking in knowledge. Binah is extrapolation, which includes feminine intuition and the like. Now, what's interesting is, I guess we'll have to hold it over tomorrow. This is not everything we did today is not what the Mekubalim emphasize that much. They emphasize a different element. Again, not inconsistent necessarily, but a different dimension of Chochma and Binah. They do identify Chochma as masculine and Binah as feminine. Yeah, they do go with that, but they move it in a different direction. And they say, Chochma is the life-giving force. Binah is that which shapes and limits the expansion of the life-giving force. And they take the example, and that's why in the HaRav's terminology, although the Ramak does not use it, Chochma is called Abba. Again, this is not the Ramak's terminology, but the HaRav uses it. Chochma is called Abba, and Binah is called Ima. And therefore, Chochma and Binah is Abba and Ima. And the same way that when the sperm fertilizes an egg, that's kind of the injection of a life force. It is the process of pregnancy. Now, although pregnancy is an expansion, but in reality, it's a shaping and a limitation. This is where it's a little counterintuitive. Because we might look at it as the little thing becomes a big thing, a complete thing. In reality, the body of the woman, the womb, shapes and directs and focuses the life force so that it becomes a human being with fingers, with toes, with arms, with eyes, as opposed to this undifferentiated life force that would keep on going and going and going and going and going. Seen in this way, the masculine force of Chochma is shaped and limited by Devorah, so it will assume the form it is supposed to take. And that is the feminine function of taking the Chochma and giving it form and giving it structure and the like. Because of this, we come to the surprising conclusion that Binah is the shirish of Gevuros. Because if Chochma is life-giving, and that life-giving is a chesed idea, it is Binah that holds back the chesed to give it proper structure and differentiation. So in effect, although chesed and Gevurah are the lower spheres, are below Chochma and Binah, the shirish of chesed is in a Chochma, and the shirish of Gevurah is in Binah. Binah is the root of Gevurahs. See, Gevurah is not only punishment, that's the mistake. Gevurah is not only punishment, Gevurah is withholding the light to limit its hispashtus, so it will take on the right form. Otherwise, it would keep on going and going, right? I'm sure over the years, you've seen the situation, comedies with the ice cream machine that you can't shut off, the soft ice cream machine just keeps on going and going and going and going and going. It fills up the whole room. So that's what it is. Gevurah is the ability to shut off the spigot, so you have the right quantity of ice cream. So Gevurah is not a bad thing. Gevurah is not punishment, but Gevurah is stopping the hispashtus of chesed, so it has the right form. Okay, and that is why Chochma is identified as masculine, called Abba, and Binah is identified as feminine, called Ima. and it is the shirish, respectively, of chasadim and gevuras. Okay, so that's how the Ramak is going to explain it, and then he'll talk about how that connects to tshuva. That'll be the main thing. In other words, the bottom line is going to be, but I'll explain it tomorrow, is that Binah is connected to tshuva, and we'll talk about why that is so. Okay.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.